Boom. All right. All right. So here we are Sunday morning. It's what is it? It's a noon on the East Coast in South Carolina.
Yeah, that's correct.
I'm in the Central Time Zone, and it's 11 o'clock on a Sunday. Soul Speaks 5D. We've got a beautiful couple with us, new friends. We don't know anything about them, and this is typical Soulology style. We're going to have a conversation for the next 90 minutes or so, and
Cool.
in front of a bunch of people and get to know these folks. If you come in, give us a heart so we can know you're here. Give us a comment so we can hear what you got to say. And don't forget about the Soulology Fest, December 8th, 9th, and 10th in Houston, Texas. I am gonna release that later today, and the ticket menu. And it's gonna be a heck of a show. So I just want to mention that right now while I have it on my mind. But yeah, so we've got Allison and Will Brown with us. We don't know anything about them, but that they live in South Carolina. They did send me some material. I did look through it. Allison reached out to me quite a while ago, and as a lot of people know, I'm kind of a one-man show, so it takes me a while to get back and forth. But then in the discussions that we had back and forth, she mentioned her husband as well, and I thought, oh, okay, let's what do you want to do? Do you want to do one or the other individually, or you want to do both together? And so this is our first collaboration. I hope we have more.
Yeah.
And maybe we can do the individual, or we can just keep doing the couple, whatever the case is. But on the old program, when I said the old program, on the old network, and this is our 83rd episode of Soul Speaks 5D. That's an 11. That means something. We got a couple in front of us, so we're talking divine union codes, 11s, 22s, and so on.
Yeah.
Everything, is relevant. But I used to ask people on the show, it was a famous question. I used to say, did you have a wake-up experience, or have you always been this weird? But I think in the case of a couple, it's interesting to hear what's going on with them in terms of their own evolution and expansion through this period of time on or about 2012, because for some people it was much further, and some people it's only been a couple of years ago, or even a couple of months. But to actually transcend and navigate this transition we call ascension together, right? That's always fascinating to me. And then of course the bond that the two have, the connection, is full of code as well. So I really don't know where y'all would like to start, but maybe how did y'all meet? And what was your outlook and level of awareness when you met, and kind of where did it go from there?
We grew weird together.
Yeah, it's been a long journey. I mean, we've been married now, it'll be 33 years together, 35 years. And
wow.
I was freshly minted out of boot camp, and a year into the military. I served about almost 30 years in the Coast Guard and retired in 2014. But when I first met Allison, my weirdness was already there. Though I didn't look at it as being weird. It was just some things that I learned how to navigate stresses in life early on through meditations and different things like that. And when I first met Allison, it was, I don't know, maybe a month or so after I had met Allison, I said, hey, have you ever meditated? You want to go on a flight deck and meditate and look at the stars? So it was quite interesting, and she had no idea what she was in for. And
I was a conservative Christian at that time, and thought all of that sort of stuff was going to put me on the fast lane to hell. And so, I thought you were a little quirky, but interesting. And obviously we were destined to be together, and luckily you stuck it out. And so for the most part, majority of our life, we sort of just, had kids and did the normal 3D stuff. I convinced him to come to church with me because he wasn't raised in the church. And it was there that the seeds started to bloom, because that was when God spoke to me and said, you need to start a hands-on healing team in your church. And I didn't know where that notion came from. It just popped in out of the blue. But I went to the pastor, and the pastor said, I knew someone was coming. And I said, okay, well, I guess we got the same message. And so it was there that I started practicing hands-on healing and understanding my role in the healing space,
All right.
and understanding that God still spoke to people, like
Right.
without the intercession of the pastor. And so once we moved, that was in Texas. We were with the Coast Guard in Texas. And once we moved here to South Carolina, we never really found a church that we enjoyed as much as we had found our church family in Texas. And so we started falling away from the church. It took about 4 years until I finally got brave enough to take a Reiki class. And I wanted to sort of see how that aligned with what I already understood about hands-on healing.
Right.
And although the terminology and the verbiage were different, the process was the same. In the church, I called it Holy Spirit running through me. And
Right.
of course, it's universal life force energy with Reiki. And so that was really probably our turning point. And that was around the end of 2014 into 2015. And of course, when I started working on Will, he was my first guinea pig. And that's things, that's when things started unlocking for him a whole lot.
Yeah, reawakening. I would say more than unlocking. It was just a reawakening of stuff. So I mean, in my high school formative years, I had out of body experiences, and it was through meditation. I had a psychology class that in high school that had us meditating 15 minutes before class, and I had out of body experiences. I learned how I could, go into that meditative space to go into an out of body experience, though I didn't use it frequently, but that's what helped me in the very first few years of my military career under very stressful situations. And just to be able to kind of disassociate from the stress and be able to be more in the zone, if you could call it that, and be more focused. So, but I mean, it was even within the first year of dating, you have the conversations of, where do you see ourselves, in 10 years, where do you see ourselves, if we're going to stick this out. And I told her, I said, I see us working together. I see myself sitting at home, signing your books and sticking them in the mail because you're going to be writing books. And no, there's no way that, none of that, blah, blah, blah. That was Allison's response. And here we are, fast forward, 20 something years. And, books have been published, and we've been working together since roughly 2016.
See, the thing is, he's a perfectionist. And so I am not, Oscar and Felix. Yeah, that's us.
Polarity. That's the beauty of these relationships.
Right.
That's
so I'm like,
right.
Absolutely no way could I work with you.
That's
but
right.
we had no idea what was in store for us and how we would work together. And now it's completely natural.
And for me, the pivotal moment of working together was the moment at which, as Allison said, we practiced Reiki on me. And as she was practicing Reiki on me, I knew that this had to be something my fellow veterans could experience.
Yeah.
This needed to be done. This needed to be taken care of in the VA. By that point, I was already being seen by the VA for lower back issues and all kinds of stuff. And of course, the VA's primary go-to is, here's your bag of drugs, come back next week and we'll give you some more, and just keep feeding you the pills. And I found that through the Reiki and a few other practices, I could alleviate all that medication from my system and live a life of understanding pain itself and how to manage it. Well, when I could figure that out, I said, this needs to go to the VA. My fellow veterans need this. And we approached our local VA here in Charleston, South Carolina, and they accepted us with open arms and said, if you want to start a volunteer program, we'll let you run with it. And so we did from roughly 2016, I guess, until COVID. We had 20 to 30 volunteers throughout the greater Charleston area that the VA covers. And we provide services twice a week in different facilities around Charleston and throughout the low country here. And it was a phenomenal practice. So, but it was one of the very first meetings we had with doctors, one of the primary care groups there at the VA. And we're in this big conference room, and it's all doctors, psychologists, every field you could think of. And Allison, very astute in the way she can speak to large groups, just did her thing. And I sat back and I had the biggest smile on my face. And I was filled with so much gratitude. I was like, this is that, and I hesitate to use the word, but this prophecy of working together, here it is right in front of me. And it was
Absolutely.
just absolutely amazing to see that and see the relationship in a whole new light from
Yeah.
that point forward. So,
Well, I've always said for myself, and I believe it applies to other people too, is the only prophecy that I ever have experienced has been about my own life, right? Like
yeah.
even right now, the way things are happening right now, things that I was given 12 years ago. I just want to ask you a quick question.
Yeah.
When you were in Texas with the Coast Guard, where were you?
Well, first we started at Port Mansfield and
Okay.
then worked our way down to Harlingen. We lived in Harlingen, and then I
Okay.
was transferred to South Padre Island. And from there, I was at South Padre Island until 9/11. And then I did a stint at Port Aransas. So,
Okay. 9/11. Yeah, because my brother-in-law who transitioned, John Alexander, he was at Port Aransas around that time. He would have been around that
Wow.
time.
amazing.
Yeah. He was a tech. He was a tech. He was like worked on electronic stuff.
Okay.
But yeah, so I'm from Corpus Christi originally. I'm actually going to
Okay.
go down
Oh,
there in about
neat.
10 days. Yeah.
Yeah.
Home of Selena.
Yeah. Well, I'm real familiar with that area all the way down to, because I worked in my old life, I worked in home building and remodeling, and I
Okay.
covered everything from, Corpus South,
Yeah. Yeah.
really,
Yeah,
really
very-
went further than that, but everything in South Texas. So I'm very familiar with the border. I built a lot of houses down
Yep.
in the border and spent time in South Padre, and of course grew up in North Padre. My
Yeah.
mom actually worked for the National Seashore
Oh.
when they opened it up in the mid 60s.
Yeah.
Wow.
Cool.
Yeah.
That's
So
really neat.
So you, this is fascinating. First of all, big props to you for having having the courage and the wherewithal to go into the matrix apparatus and actually put something out there like that. And I think that's, really obviously highly commendable. I mean,
Well-
with all parties involved, because for them to be open to it, and then even with the all the talk about divine feminine and divine masculine and distorted feminine and and this and that, and of course in these circles, I would say beginning on around 2012, you heard a lot about the feminine, a lot about the mother goddess energy. She has landed, mama's home, and the years and years of, hey, we're back, we're taking our power back. And I really feel like that there is, over the last few months, in particular, a slow rising of the true masculine energy. We spent so much time talking about the feminine that's been suppressed in all of us, and rightfully so. But all this time, I think we've forgotten that there's this masculine energy that was basically the actualizer of the patriarchal. So these folks that went to war, these folks that did things and depleted themselves as she did, in their own way, on their own storylines, and all you got to do is look at veterans and the way that, well, look at the mule kind of connotation of the man, and what he was programmed to do energetically, and how that further depleted our, let's just say, our divine natural frequencies. But look at the way they're treated in this country. So I'm such a big believer that it's not the big things, it's not the marches and the protests and the boycotts, it's the individual efforts of people that actually change the energetics of this world, especially where you have two or more, especially with these power couples. So yeah, I just got to throw that Sology bomb in there because it's the real deal. So you guys have this incredible dual prophecy kind of thing with your own life. It starts occurring and everything. I'm curious and we can bounce all over the place, but having, so many people were awakened, the door kind of opened through Reiki.
Yes.
Even going back to like the 90s, so many
Mhm.
people, the 4,300 shows come on here and talk about, yeah, I did Reiki, and then everything started opening, and
Mhm.
Yeah.
but I wonder what it would have been like. Just share with us just for a bit, because you remarked about it. What was it like to have a room full of veterans, or lay them on the table or in the chair, and I'm sure these guys, psychologically, mentally, emotionally, physically, the whole nine yards, to actually, because I know in terms of like energy work, that obviously the practitioner is you first and foremost going to open up their field 360 degrees if possible, as much as they can, because that's such an important part of it for them to be the conduit in the channel. But also the client's receptivity is going to affect the the potential of the alignment or the healing or whatever you want to call it, proportionate to how comfortable they are, how open they are. What was it like to work with these veterans who are coming out of this straight line kind of, paradigm into the flow of the feminine being supported by this, wonderful, beautiful masculine sitting next to you?
Yeah. I mean, I can share countless stories, but the ones, the number of stories that stick in my mind are the ones that, and we're not talking, we're doing full length sessions on a table. They're sitting in a chair in front of us for 15 minutes. That's it. 15 minutes. And countless times I've had veterans that have had PTSD, extreme PTSD for years, numbers of years. Get done with a 15-minute session, take a deep sigh and look at me and say, sir, this is the first time I've not thought about my PTSD. And that to me is just incredible. If PTSD is that forefront in your space, your energy, that you cannot set it aside and think about something positive or something that will maneuver you away from the thought of PTSD, but yet it's always there in the forefront. But yet this 15-minute session allows you to disconnect and disassociate with the PTSD for that amount of time, to allow your body to start to relax to a point at which you look up at me and tell me this is the first time you've not thought about the PTSD. That's incredible. So, that happened over and over again. Or, we had an older gentleman that would come and see us every single week. And he was a retired Episcopal, wasn't he?
I think he was a military chaplain or something.
Of many, many years. And he said, I don't know what you all are doing, but you need to bottle this and give this away, because this is amazing. So, story after story. One of the other aspects that we worked in was one of the long-term care units at the hospital. And so these patients are in there for quite a while, or even the outpatient after post-surgery, that type of situation. And we were asked to report back which rooms and which bed we provided services to.
They were working on trying to lower or reduce, I guess, the pain meds that they were giving, and they wanted to see if the Reiki was helping. It was fascinating because we gave them all of the data. And in spite of us telling them which room and which bed, they said the pain med reduction when we were on the floor was reduced in the whole unit, whole unit. It didn't matter who we were seeing, not just for those patients. So that was really profound and, explained to us what was happening with the Reiki.
And so part of our mission, and that's why we started the nonprofit that we have, Reiki for Vets, is that, for veterans who want to explore Reiki for themselves, we offer that to come and sit in our classes, as part of a scholarship, or their spouses. If they're not comfortable enough, we'd like to see their spouse or their caregiver come and receive the same attunement so that they can work on their loved ones or the ones that they're taking care of. So it's a mission that's, we're going to continue doing, though we haven't, since COVID, we haven't gone back into the VA because of the major restrictions they've put on volunteers. And, but it's interestingly enough, in the midst of COVID, about 2021.
Must have been summer of 2022.
Or
maybe 2021.
21, summer of 21. We, a gentleman that we know, mutual friend of all of us that, within our circles, reached out to us, who works at the VA, and said, hey, I've got grant money. I would love if you guys could put together a proposal to teach our nursing staff, a number of nursing staff members, in level 1 and level 2 Reiki. And we're like, absolutely. And it was interestingly enough, because it all took place right at that lull in 2021, where everybody said, oh, everything's opening back up. Everything is going to be exciting. The world is starting to open up.
That was 2022.
Oh, maybe 2022, summer of 2020. So it we got in right at the moment that we could get in. We got everybody trained, 22 nursing staff members at level 1, level 2. And then as soon as we finished, the restrictions started that fall, the restrictions started coming back up.
Right.
So yeah. So it was quite interesting.
Definitely divinely inspired
For sure.
timing for that.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, you guys are walking in divine timing
Yeah.
and grace.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, what was I going to ask you? So, oh, I know what I was going to ask you. I'm just trying to picture exactly how it went down. So they're sitting in a chair for 15 minutes. Is it a group of them or is it an individual? And are you hands-on?
Yes. So both. So here's how I'll kind of give you from the genesis to where we evolved to. So when we first approached them, and again, divine timing, they actually told us that they were looking for Reiki practitioners, but didn't know who to look to in the community. They didn't understand who to reach out to until we sent the email to them. But our first interaction was actually in the psychiatric ward of the hospital. And that is you either self-commit or you're committed there for 7 to 9 days, and it's a complete lockdown. And so we were doing hands off. They were seated in a chair, and we stood behind them, and we worked in the aura. And all we did, right, for myself and Allison, it was just right above their shoulders. And we stood there and we invoked Reiki, and we allowed that channel of energy to open and flow. And so many of those individuals just relaxed. I mean, many of them just slumped over in the chair, and they weren't asleep, but they were processing all of that beautiful energy. From that point, we moved into creating a space in some of the local clinics where we could actually go in starting once a week with 3 or 4 practitioners, and they would come in one-on-one.
It was actually, excuse me, a multi-purpose room in the outpatient therapeutic psychologist, where the psychologists were. And so they had this multi-purpose room, excuse me, and they had chairs set up, and we have to leave the door cracked. I mean, it really wasn't very private, but yet it still worked. And so there were several chairs, and if there were several people waiting, they would sit quietly. We would just ask them to sit in like a meditative space while we were working. So if we had 2 volunteers, we'd see 2 people at a time sitting in a chair. The rest would be waiting their turn and in a meditative state. And so even in that semi-private state, it was really profound. People were being, I wouldn't say permanently cured, but gout and sleeping difficulties and arthritic pain and cancer pain and all sorts of stuff and it didn't matter if they came from a Christian background or whatever. Right. I would just tell them, do you do hands-on healing in your church? Oh yeah. Okay. Well, this is the same thing. And just relax. And so we would talk to them on their level, wherever that was, and bridge the gap, because a lot of this, as you know, Todd, is just a difference in verbiage.
Yeah.
And that's really one of our goals is to figure out how to talk to somebody where they're coming from, using, the paradigm where they exist in at that moment, instead of from this metaphysical aspect that can be kind of scary for them.
Kind of like how the universe communicates with each one of us. Some people see elementals, galactics, angelics, demons, and, the whole 9 yards.
Right.
And then, having that chameleon kind of shape shifting. You know what I mean? I mean, that's what it is. We're energetic shifting. And, I've tried to do that with the show since the very beginning, way back, having conversations the first 1,000, 1,500 shows where I knew the topics, but I felt like, I guess in a way, it's kind of a Reiki-esque type of thing, because I try to represent in a universal way the people that are observing the program, right? So I would ask questions that I would kind of know the answer, I guess you would say, but I would ask them at a level where there would be a more inclusive type of thing. So I see what you're doing is very, very much the same, and I love the fact, because I think in the Western religion, has been characterized in a certain way. And there's always good and bad connotations, I guess, if you want to look at it that way. Everything's got a yin and yang to it. But people forget that, one of the 6 grandmothers that I kind of got attached to, or when I reawakened in 2011, was my second wife's grandmother, who was strong, devout Southern Pentecostal. And I mean, this woman was one of the most angelic beings I ever met. You talk about no judgment, 100% compassion. I mean, I was, not from the same cultural kind of thing. And there was a lot of, but my point is they speak in tongues. And what's light language?
Right.
And they do hands-on healing. And what's Reiki?
Right.
And,
Right.
I mean, so, and even if you look at some of the, I guess you would say, like maybe the oral traditions that come through songs and just different things that are more regional based, these things carry an energy of, I don't want to say the primordial, but that common thread that you find in every single philosophy, religion, culture, life. I mean, there's just something that can't be denied. You can call it the God particle, the goddess particle source, but to be able to actually have, the wherewithal to understand that and work within. And the other thing it reminds me of is I have a friend that's an attorney. She's been on the program quite a few times, and she's in Australia. And a lot of people, me included, at different times, people, well, let's get to the new earth. I mean, which is pretty much like, let's get to heaven, and let's get out of this rat race, and, the hell with 3D, I'm going to 5D. And she came on the show one day and she says, I don't want to go to 5D. I want to take 5D to the 3D. And so in her
Beautiful.
one of her purposes is to be that transformational agent within the structure itself. God doesn't make any junk, right? So we're not really getting rid of anything, right? So it reminds me of what you're doing, because you're going into the trenches and you're not separating yourself from what we call the matrix, or what we call, let's just say an apparatus of it, or an institution of it. And you're actually going into it with an open heart. And there's a lot to be said for that. That's a powerful, powerful thing. So for you two to be walking on, a floor of a hospital, and it's not even, in other words, that energy, that impact, and this, I mean, Reiki, your field together probably is, 2 floors up and 2 floors down.
Exactly.
Seems that way.
Yeah.
And it's what's amazing about it is, as we would go to these different floors on the hospital, and we'd start to, because we'd have to introduce ourselves, we'd have to introduce what we're going to do and what we're going to be providing and what services. And you start speaking with the nursing staff, and you'd be amazed at how many of the nursing staff, and I would reckon to say that if you stood on the street corner, you just started talking to individuals that would pass by about Reiki, I would say half of that you talk to are going to say, oh yeah, my grandmother did something like that. Or she, there was something that my grandmother, or I have an aunt, or I have an uncle, or they know somebody that has done something very similar to that. So this nursing staff that we would approach and tell them, oh yeah. I've heard about that. I had a session a while back, I never followed up on it, but so they're very familiar with it and very open about it. Now, did we have pushback on a few? Sure, of course.
Really only one.
Yeah.
I think there was only one nurse that said, oh, well, that doesn't gel with my religion or whatever. And I said,
okay,
completely fine.
Yeah.
But really, we didn't get the pushback that I expected. Now, see, and this is why it wasn't scary to us, because I had already reconciled and bridged from the Christian aspect into the greater spiritual aspect. And I understood the language and how to communicate and how to get past those roadblocks. And so I actually, on one hand, did expect more roadblocks than we got, but I wasn't afraid of them, and we still aren't. And I think that's why we can have these conversations.
Yeah. And it comes down to, from my military experience, you approach new scenarios, new situations very strategically. And you may be trained in a very specific area of your existence for military, but yet you're thrust into areas that are unknown to you. Well, you have to adapt. And I like the word chameleon. You have to change just a piece of you in order to speak the language of where you're going. And I think that's where and I'm not going to generalize, but many practitioners, they get very stovepiped or pigeonholed into one specific area, and that's all they can talk about. And they can't see outside of the perimeter of that to reach a broader crowd, meaning, reach across, I hate to use a political term, but reach across different aisles to speak their language, but yet use the same tools to convey the message.
Yeah.
It does take a bit of strategy to do that, but it's fascinating when you can just step out and talk to anybody about anything.
Yeah.
You'd be amazed on how many people actually have had experiences, have had different situations take place. They just don't want to talk about it because they're going to feel crazy, that
well, this is where all the crazy people hang out. We have a saying here.
You know what? If this is
crazy anymore.
Yeah, if this is crazy, I'd rather be on this side of crazy than that side of crazy.
Well, I feel like that's what's occurring. And it's interesting what you said, these observations about the practitioners, because I have noticed that, doing the show is a great luxury for me in many ways. And one of those ways is, it allows me to tap into, the movement, I guess, the phase or the feel for the collective through the individual, because as the individual goes, so goes the collective. And one of the things I've watched, and this goes back to really to like late 2021, and I really started to see it in 2022, and that was these practitioners coming in with a quickly altering approach in a couple of ways, and I can't really speak to their chameleon-esque type of communication skills, but I would think it probably fell into it as well, because what I was finding is they were expanding they were dropping modalities, they were dropping processes, and a lot of these people downloaded these processes over periods of time, going back to what you said at the beginning of the show, how you could meditate and you could kind of, a lot of these people had traumatic episodes where they would pop out of their body, and through years of trauma or abuse or something, they were developing these really tight connections with their higher level aspects, etc. But yeah, I noticed that there was a much more open kind of approach and a much more humbleness to it all. But I think this is also reflected for all of us in the world itself, because 2020, 2021, and like you said, up to that point, 2022, 2.5 years, people were locked down. They were in more self-introspection. They were having to get to know people that they lived with, that they haven't talked to in 20 years or whatever the case is. And of course, the whole schedule, the whole regiment, the whole controlling regimen of 9 to 5 and kids in school, a lot of the stuff got busted up. So I think energetically, it really expanded a lot of people. I wanted to ask you too, like, a lot of people have moved. Well, let me say this too, what you were saying about talking to people that had some level of experience or interaction with Reiki in some form or fashion, directly or indirectly. I think that's a really good point to make, because, Reiki, I think Reiki really began to surge in the 90s, or at least in the Western world. And then it, of course, just grew from there. And then I remember hearing, like, 3, 4, 5 years ago, everybody's a Reiki master, everybody's a Reiki master. And I thought, well, what the hell's wrong with that? Because I remember, and I'm a very unconventional light worker, I guess you would say, things, I guess, because it was very innate, some of these things you look back on, but I remember using Reiki on myself as even as a child, like, so I'd say like 7, 8, 9 years old, having this relationship with my body where I understood what was happening. I could move my hands over it. I have 6 children, so I can remember, middle of the night, I had one of my kids was growing so fast, he had those growing pains. And not even knowing, you're waking up at 2 a.m, your kid's screaming, you hate it when your kids get hurting, and just putting my hand, where does it hurt? And then just putting my hand above. It's like you were talking about working on those veterans without actually putting hands on. And so I feel like that everybody has it. You know, everybody has it. And then there's been this massive, you know, this massive widespread use of remote Reiki. That is, why would it be any less real? I can remember laying in a bed in Utah in 2017 when I was traveling around like a hobo, and this mother and daughter tapped in. You know, I mean, I did a video or something, and they're like, I didn't say anything. I remember that, and I remember them texted me when I must have been like 2 a.m. They said, we one of us had tapped in, and you know, something's going on with your knees or something like that. And I'm like, how do they know that? And then next, okay, with your permission, we're going to do this remote Reiki. I'm like, okay, well, and the next thing I know, you know, I'm feeling this fire in my legs, and, you know, sure enough. So this is, you know, like a huge thing. This is much more than a occupation or a modality. This is I would, you know, look for some feedback on this, but from you, but I mean, this is really one of our natural abilities and skills. If that's probably not even the right type of word, it's just our natural nature. And the more widespread, everybody should be a Reiki master, I guess is what I'm saying. What are your thoughts on you being put out of a job? I know that probably wouldn't happen anytime soon, but, and I know you're into other things as well, but
Sure.
is there some, does that make sense? And not just to
Yeah.
agree with me, but I mean, everybody has this ability, do they not?
You struck it right on the head. When people ask me that know nothing about Reiki, the first example I give them is, I said, if you're a parent and your child is injured, what's the very first thing you do? You run over, you place their hands on them, and they become calm.
Right.
They stop crying. They start to relax. I said, what do you think's doing that? Is it just your presence, or is it the energy that you're transferring to them? And once they get that, once that clicks, then it kind of knocks the door open for them to start understanding, okay, maybe there is something more to this. And now let me explore through Reiki, you know, this modality. I mean, there are many different forms of hands-on healing or Reiki or whatever, but you know, Reiki is just one form with a protocol.
Right. But ultimately, what are we doing? We're channeling
Yeah.
love. We're channeling the
Right.
divine love that
Right.
we all
Yep.
are.
Yep.
We are that. We are all connected to source. And so all you're doing is opening the gateway
Right.
for that love to flow through you and into the next person, whether it's in a
Mhm.
church or on the street or in your home or whatever.
Yep.
So absolutely everybody can do this, and you
Yeah.
don't have to be trained per se. I love what you said though about these new people. All of a sudden their gifts are turning on. It's kind of like as we're moving into these higher level energies and we're moving into 5D, the DNA piece just turns on people. It's like, okay, you're 43. Yeah, at 43 in your contract, we have to turn the DNA on so that you can unlock. And so they'll come to us too for channelings or what have you, and they don't know what's going on. They're hearing voices, or they're starting to speak. Light language is a very common one. Words are coming out and they can't control it, or they're seeing spirit or whatever. So it's time and things are unlocking, and then they're just using their internal guidance to heal or work with people however they're instructed to do it.
Yeah.
Throw out the rule book, throw out the manual. We don't need any of that. And God bless those that have been doing this for a long time, that were trained mediums or trained psychics, and they worked through the 60s and the 70s and the 80s when not so much persecuted is the word, but they were looked down upon or frowned upon or looked at as weirdos. And they paved the way for us, but we are operating in completely different energy and different paradigms at this point.
Yeah.
And so you can't operate by those same rules, even with astrology and things like that.
And you know, you touched on the remote Reiki, you know, the distance Reiki. Well, I mean, if you subscribe to the whole quantum entanglement aspect, you know, string theory,
Right.
there is no distance.
That's right.
You're sitting, you know, in Texas, we're sitting here in Charleston, but in reality, in the quantum field that we all exist in, you're merely just a particle away from me.
Yeah.
And so if you can lock into that quantum connection, everything is possible. I mean, it doesn't matter whether it's Reiki or whether it's, you know, remote viewing, whether it's whatever it is, it's a skill that needs to be refined, but it's all connected through that quantum entanglement. So
Yeah. It's like one big, I was talking to a couple of friends yesterday. We had a meeting, and one of them is kind of an ascension etymologist. So she translates things really quickly too. And one of them was we were talking about the network and how, it's got 4 pillars, and one of them is the database. And she says archive. And I said, yeah, archive. And she says arc hive, right? Like ark, the container, like, reference to like Noah,
Yep,
but really,
yep.
we know this is much bigger. And then and the hive thing, which, yeah, I did a spirit walk this morning, where I just turn on the thing and I start walking down the street. And that was one of the things that I was talking about. Like, oneness is so much bigger than we ever thought, and even what we think now. And for one thing, we came here to feel, right? We came here to experience pain and suffering and trauma. These are
Mhm.
things that in a very dense body, right? Like this is part of the earth experience. These are things that we look at today and go, beam me up, get me the hell out of here. But from the soul level, we're going, hey, this is all the other stuff, the fun stuff we know about, I mean, we want to go experience things that will expand us. So I really, can feel for that. And then this thing about the energy, because that's really what it comes down to. We're energy. We have this dense form, or at least apparently we do. We're learning that our field, just like you guys walking around the hospital ward, you're impacting people, patients that you didn't even walk in their room, right? This
Mhm.
is a powerful thing, especially where you have this external version of the sacred marriage potential that we have within ourselves that's fully engaged. But one last example, I was talking to my friends yesterday, and I have had the luck, again, had the privilege of interacting over the years on this show with young people, and that's a whole nother thing with these young people coming onto the earth now, especially all these COVID babies, you know what I mean? That are going to totally blow things away because they're so much cleaner and et cetera, et cetera. And of course, a lot, obviously we got to give our due, like you were talking about with the people in the 60s and 70s with those folks that kind of cleared the energetic field so they could come in clean and remain clean.
Mhm.
But I met a 9-year-old girl yesterday, just briefly. Can she say hello to you? She wants to say hello to you. I'm very good, friends with her mom. And I hadn't met her, I'd heard of her. And wow, you talk about, I mean, it was one of the most powerful experiences I've had in the last few years, really. And
Yeah.
I've had amazing experiences, apparitions, I've had all kinds of stuff happen. But one of the things that she did, as she told me a few things, she named a planet that was MM19876 or something like that. Like, I travel around the universe and I know where everything, and I'm like, wow,
Love it.
But then she looked at me, and her face too. It wasn't like looking at a human face, but it looked like, well, her aura, her
Mm.
countenance was something that you could tell was always the way it was. Where with us, who've been through the grind a little bit, it comes and goes, right? But she started to motion. She goes, I want to send you a love ball. And
Oh,
she starts motioning around her heart. And bam, throws it at me. And I'm telling you, I felt it come into me.
Love
And
it.
I
yeah.
just went, wow. I felt like I was, like it was an experience such as I've had and many people have had with, uh, external, what seemed to be external aspects or that type of thing, angels,
Yeah.
and other things, elementals and other things, nature beings. But God, it was so powerful. And I thought, oh my God, and I thought of something that I was told when I first reawoke in 2011, and then kind of was given the name Sology, as part of my mission in March of 2012. And I remember them, I do getting the downloads, day after day, week after week. And I remember hearing, you're going to have to bust your ass for about 10 years. And then the kids are coming. And I knew it didn't relate to just Sology. And I thought, and here we are now. So I can't even imagine, after experiencing what I experienced yesterday, and here we are talking about energy, because that's what Reiki is. That's what we are.
Yeah.
But yeah, the impact of these young people, what in an unspoken way, just like in a tuning fork kind of analogy that
Yeah.
they're having on this earth, or demonstrating or representing the higher alignment expansion of the earth itself as the consciousness and all those involved is quite amazing. Now you talk about you made reference to people coming to you for things beyond Reiki, right? Because I mean, you have a big tool belt. I already know this.
Yeah.
And one of the other things that I've noticed, and I'd be really interested to know, and I think others would too, is something there. Obviously, there was a great catalyst in the COVID thing. It was a great gift from the divine orchestration that we all have a hand in, really.
Sure.
And then we, of course, have the human impact. But one of the other things that the practitioners in mass started to talk about toward the end of last year was that who was walking in the door. Now, if it was a client that they'd seen before, they were coming in with the type of questions and experiences that you were talking about, but they were also referencing people that they'd never seen before. So I was wondering, because I'm sure, you've got such a wealth of experience, like throughout this year, end of last year, whatever, the last 12 months, whatever you want to reference, who's walking in the door, and what are you hearing and what are you seeing, when you take them as a collective? What kind of feel are you getting for the transformation that's taking place?
Yeah, we were just talking about this just the other day.
That's fascinating. Good question.
Yeah.
And you can see the progression, and it's very interesting. Like you said, when we first started this in 2018, 2019, we were seeing light workers. They were coming in to be on the front line. They were coming in to clear whatever needed to be cleared or heal or hear from their higher self. Then it started turning into people who had attachments and entities, which is a whole other thing because we weren't about that, but yet they were in our face and they needed help. So we were guided to help them. Now we just got out of a private channeling where we talk to our guides regularly, and we were told your clientele is about to change again. And the people that are going to start coming to you now are the normal people, the just total 3D people who all of a sudden are seeing things or hearing things or whatever. That's going to change. We have yet to see any of them yet. I mean, this was just days ago. So it is fascinating to watch
the progression.
Shifts. Yeah.
And it goes in cycles like that, where it's, you get a cluster of clientele for a certain amount of time. And it almost is like, wash, repeat, wash, rinse, repeat. It's over and over again. The messages are all different, but the clientele all fit within one mold. And it's great to see that.
Yeah, we did have a spate of 30-something women typically who were coming in with ancestral trauma. They were here to clear and close that whole ancestral line off and heal it all the way back.
When was this happening? When was that part?
This was within the past year.
Yeah, but
starting last year.
Yeah, but moving into the end of last year. And then it cycled. Okay. Yeah. So midsummer last year into the fall.
Who had a lot, they had a lot of family trauma. There was abuse, all of that sort of stuff. And they were 30 and awakening. And they're like, I can't live with this anymore. I'm here. And every single one of their higher selves said, you took this on because you are to clear it for your whole ancestral line. It's not going to impact you moving forward. But I did want to go back to what you said about the children, because I don't know if you remember, but I am in the matrix as a public school educator still by day. And so I work with children in grades 6 through 12, and I work at an alternative school where I see the behavior problems, right? All of the ones that are on the verge of expulsion. So I have 100 of those, and I'm the only counselor there. And so what's interesting about those, they don't recognize their gifts yet, most of them, but I have helped some of them who have had weird things happen to them, and they've come in and talked to me, and I was able to help them to understand that
to navigate around it. Yeah.
But most of them are here to poke the system, the ones that I deal with. They're here to change the way we educate children, the way we look at children, the way we teach them and interact with them and look at them. But in that, one of my coworkers, her granddaughter is in first grade, and she talks to the man on the moon. And luckily, this coworker is turned on and understands. And so she cracks me up. She'll tell me, "Oh yeah, my granddaughter said, she's talking to the man on the moon." And I asked her, "Well, how did you start talking to the man on the moon? And she said, well, one night I was looking up at the moon and I said, is there anybody there who wants to talk to me? And this person started talking to me. And so luckily her grandmother, my friend, treated her seriously and with respect and conversed with her about it. But that kind of thing is so amazing and awesome. I love that.
Yeah. And I for parents that may be watching this and that have young children, I know it was, in the day, don't talk to your imaginary friend. That's just your imaginary friend.
Course, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I'd say encourage it. Encourage that.
Absolutely.
Open that channel of information up and listen and learn, because really the children that are coming in are the master teachers.
Yep.
They're the ascended masters. Yeah. They're the ones that are coming in to change the world that we see in front of us.
Right.
And you bring up children again, we just had a young lady yesterday. She's a senior in high school, and she's come to us once before because she had some surgery and wanted to have some relief from the pain. And so that Reiki session was more around that. This session was it's been about a year-ish or so. And as soon as I connected with this young lady, I was impacted in a way that I started weeping. Yeah. The entire session, I just started weeping. Yeah. And I got done with the session. I'm like, who gave Reiki to who? Who's
that's and you know what? Not even just with the kids though. That's how like this show is, right? I mean, I guess in my own way, I'm a practitioner. I'm an energy worker. Yep. I just do something different. And again, talking to practitioners, over the years, because a lot of the people that come on the show are practitioners. And that to me is a characteristic of a session. We talk about a universal equal energy exchange. Like there is something to be said for that. There's something to be said. I mean, on the surface, it might look like somebody is a client or a patient and somebody is, but it's still a Vesica Pisces, or they open 360 degrees and they come together and there's that creative, life force seed. Yeah, that's a really good point. And then getting back to the kids, I mean, these kids, I mean, we have had people come on here talk about, they pick me up at night, Mom, we walk through the wall, we go up onto the ship, I have another one come on, is like, I'm from a blue planet and I came here to clean up the oceans. And I have a friend I talked to this morning who's going to be involved with the Soulgy Fest, and she lives off grid with a 4 or 5-year-old, and they're outside of Austin, off grid, they live remote and have some land. And her daughter, who I can't wait to meet, we're actually going to have a 20 by 20 tent for kids at the Soulgy Fest.
Wow.
And it's going to be decorated in a colorful, I mean, it's, make it up as you go, right? And so she's going to be involved in that. But anyway, this kid will tell her, and the mother is lit. Okay. The mother is, psychic. And she'll say, Mom, the rainbow people are down at the river. or she'll say, there's a rainbow cat over there. And her mom will be like, where, and then other things happen, other things happen. They walk down to the river to go have a dip, and in their path, there's a snake. Because there's like a little, like a little cove, right, where they jump in and like a little pool. And the mom says to her, well, do you want to, wait till the snake's out of the way? She goes, oh, no, we'll just go right through them. I mean, this is and again, going back to what you were talking about, Allison, with what you do, again, to go into the system and transform from I would say like the third eye out, right, is so commendable too, because those are the kids that are the ones that you're talking about. Those are the kids that are the ones that are potentially, because it only takes one of them, right? I mean, they can alter things, just like in your experience with this person, this young lady. I mean, because they're labeled and they're not accepting the labels. I've got 6 children. The 2 youngest are now 20, 21, and 22. The 22-year-old left home at 14, 15 and said, I'm not playing by these rules. And, and as a parent, you're just pulling your hair out, right? The other one, same thing, 15 years old, said, I'm not doing this. I want to make this arrangement in my life. And both of them, it's totally different paths, totally different, but doing their own thing and just rolling through it like a bulldozer. And yeah, they have their ups and downs like we all do and everything, but I watch them and I'm just in amazement. I'm going, wow, like this is crazy. This is, but it's not it's not an aberration. These kids that are diagnosed as autistic or spectrum or ADHD, these kids are aliens, but they're not aliens. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I mean, they're actually, So, and again, just to kind of close that out, I'm with you. I've always kind of understood that we're part of the dynamics of the age that we're in. This transition is where they start to teach us. Now, that may not be them standing in front of a classroom teaching a bunch of 60-year-olds with a textbook, but it's through those exchanges in interactions like you're talking about with this session that you just had. So, wow,
sure.
that's powerful. I didn't.
They're teaching us through challenging us, because trust me, it's not an easy job. And there are many days that I ask my higher self and guides to please liberate me from that place, because it's difficult. It really is.
Yeah,
and I
sure.
understand that all of these organizations, whether it's political, educational, whatever, are going to implode. They have to, because they were built in fear and they need to be rebuilt in love. So to bear witness to that inside as it implodes is very challenging.
Oh yeah, I'm sure
day.
it is. I'm sure it is. And now, how did you mention that? That's the second time. Your guides, your team. You mentioned it as individually speaking to what you were just talking about, but also a minute ago you talked about it as a couple. Do you have a routine? Is it part of your day, part of your week, where you intentionally connect together with your team? And how does that work for you guys?
No, it's not a routine thing every day. We probably tap in for some reason every day, whether it's to see a client or to hold a class or whatever. So the channeling aspect and tapping into that realm, no matter who we're talking to, we do frequently. So every now and then I'll be developing a list of questions or things that I want to explore with our teams personally. And so I'll ask them, hey, we have some time this afternoon. Can we go up and do a channeling? And I'll talk to our team, his team, and get some advice, whether it's health or next steps or what have you.
What's on the horizon, that kind of thing. Yeah.
Now, most of the couples that I've talked to, I would say 95%, and I can't give you a number, but I got to say at least 100. Okay. The characteristics tend to be, which makes sense, women's intuition, but that the feminine is kind of the antenna, the receiver, like the playing that part of it. And so you mentioned that you said you go into the channel or connect with whoever. And I loved, because I have a very curious mind. So I love asking these questions because we learn something from everybody. And people have different explanations and different experiences. And I know it's all the same in the end, but like, what is your team? What are these experiences like? Are you tapping into what you would consider angelics or galactics, elemental, all of the above, your higher selves only, your souls only, however you want to put that? And has that remained constant, or has that evolved and changed as well?
It's evolved. It's evolved. And it was 2018 in March of 2018, during a QHHT session that Will was having as a volunteer for a new practitioner. she laid him out on the table. She went through the induction. Long story short, he ended up channeling Enoch during that session. He had no idea. I mean, he was Coast Guard, right? We were very just normal.
I had no idea what QHHT was.
Right.
All I saw were the letters, and I love to experiment. I love to be a guinea pig for stuff. So I just signed up. I didn't know what to expect. And lo and behold, here I am, and I drop into a deep hypnotic trance where,
Wow.
I'm in a session for an hour to 2 hours, and I don't remember a thing of what takes place. So I completely check out.
So the practitioner was so excited that she was like, can I come back and do this again? And so she came 4 or 5 weeks in a row to explore, to explore who else wanted to talk. Right. And so eventually we understood that Will had a team, but they call themselves the Collective, and it's Archangel Raphael, Michael, Enoch, and Source. And so that team, then we would start talking to, and they explained that he would be channeling everything, and that he really does. I mean, this is not an ego-based thing by any means, but he can channel and tune in like a radio frequency to anything that we intend to speak with. So we've spoken, we do pet channelings routinely for pets that are alive or deceased, deceased loved ones, all of the angels, all of the guides. ETs are particularly my favorite. And that's the subject of my last book. I love that. So every time you mention that, I'm like, yay.
Oh, we got to talk about that. We still have
Right. So
awesome.
I guess it was summer of 2018 is when, I don't know if you are familiar with Candace Kroll Goldman, but she founded Beyond Quantum Healing.
We've had her on the show.
Yeah. So I took her training, thinking that the reason I was guided to that training was to help him channel, because we can't just call our practitioner friend over every time we want to talk to the guides. So I put him under, of course. He was my first client. And I talked to his team. I was like, holy shit, this really works. Oh my God. So he goes out, his team comes in, and I talked to them for an hour and 45 minutes. I was completely blown away. And they said, you are not doing this just for him. You're doing this so you can help others, which I do. I do that as a practice as well. But that just led to one thing to it. But at that time, we were still inducing him on a table.
Right.
Eventually, his team trained him in early 2019 to sit in a chair and induce himself. Took him 4 minutes the first time.
So what you're saying, induce himself, are you still in a Q&A with them, in a conversation with them, or?
I'll say the nuts and bolts of it are that I keep, when a client contacts us to contact their higher self and answer some questions, like they went through a BQH or QHHT session, but they have a hard time getting into hypnosis.
Okay.
I remove myself from any of that conversation. I don't want to have any idea what's taking place. All I want to know is that individual's name. That's all I want to know.
Right.
And so that way I am completely clean, completely sterile of any information. And the day of the session comes, I sit in a chair. If you're the client, I know your name, and I close my eyes and we do a little bit of breath work together. And within a minute or so, I drop into a trance. Your higher self comes through. Allison facilitates all the questionings from that point.
Right.
So it's
you're like
synergy is very, very tight.
Yeah, I've done this kind of work with my wife. It's similar sometimes when the client is, how the saying goes, it was too traumatic, I don't want to relive it, or there's fear with it. So she calls it a proxy session.
Right. Yeah. We also call it a surrogate session.
Okay. So so that I get that. I hadn't heard it through this method, and I think it's pretty powerful what you're talking about, because it speaks to the connection that you both have individually with infinite intelligence, but also with each other, which is formidable, because the math, to me, the geometry, what have you, is totally different now in this atmosphere. You mentioned, in your own words, like the universal energy, what it is today versus what it was in the 60s or the 70s. I mean, yes, there's a lot of things that served us to a certain point, and they are certainly held in no less esteem, but they're not what they used to be, because there's a higher truth every day. You know what I mean? And I find your story absolutely amazing, having spent a lot of time in the South in my former career. I worked for Home Depot, which is
Mhm.
about as Southern as you could get. I worked for Jim Walter Homes, which was
Yeah.
most Southern you could get, a bunch of Navy guys. That was, so to be able to go from traditional Southern Western religion, and here you are, your last book was about the ETs, which we got to jump into this, okay? Because everything's starting to converge. And I'm very organic. My wife is very galactic.
Ah,
And we've been interacting for over 7 years, going on 8 years. And so that's been an interesting thing to observe and be a part of, in terms of kind of the inversion, right? Like one's coming this way, one's, you know what I mean? But really I'm saying that in terms of what it's reflecting, globally or collectively.
Mhm.
So yeah, I'd love to just dive in this last 20 minutes into that part of it, or at least a portion of this, maybe the next 15 minutes. But like, how did that all happen for you? Because I mean, you're coming from, I don't know if you're a Baptist or whatever, doesn't matter, but Southern, US religion. I mean, you're talking about the Deep South is a totally different thing. I've
Yeah.
lived all over the country. I lived in Chicago, New York, LA. I mean, the Deep South, that's some deep, deep roots. There are some primordial energies in these churches and the culture. But what was that like? Like, what was the first time that you kind of stepped into that container, and now you're talking to Star Family?
well, what's interesting is I was raised Episcopalian, and I was already challenging the church at 13 and asking questions that I shouldn't have asked. I talk about that in the first book. I get into that background, and he wasn't raised in the church, so he wasn't really afraid of any of this stuff. It didn't bother him.
No.
But what was interesting is, because he wasn't raised in the church, the first person that he channeled was Enoch, and I knew who that was because I'm familiar with the Bible. He had no idea. So I knew that it was profound, and he didn't make it up because he couldn't have made it up. He had no idea who that was. And since then, he's channeled Melchizedek and other names that he would not have any idea who that was. But in one of those first few QHHT sessions, he also discovered that he has a parallel life as a Zeta, little gray. And that was a 5D being who is the one that gives him all of the technical knowledge and background. Like, he can see an engine. He was a Coast Guard engine mechanic. So he would be able to go to sleep one night and wake up and understand how to, or he would listen to the engine and he could basically hear it speaking to him, knowing how to fix it. He could fix things that nobody else could. And we came to find out that it was the ET, the Zeta, his knowledge and information background that was basically feeding him stuff. And so what was really interesting is, one of those times when he went out into trance, his body started elongating and he became the Zeta and was speaking as the Zeta. And so we were questioning, and that was one of the first ET beings that we started getting a rapport with and talking to and channeling. And so he was fun to talk to me, because he was a little bit more of a human, or had more of a human understanding than like the angels, the angelic realm and all of that, because they're a little more profound when they speak, and they've never been a human. Right. So he was fun to talk to. I'm like, what, tell me about your spaceship, and where are you, and how's humanity doing, and what do you do all the time? All of that kind of stuff. That was really fun. We had a good relationship. And so it just grew from there. And then we started talking to collectives, and that, for whatever reason, I don't know if it's because my dad read a lot of science fiction. I was just fascinated by it. And I, as a child, I would write book reports on the Loch Ness Monster and the Bermuda Triangle, and all of that stuff fascinated me. So I just went off on the ET tangent. That was just my thing. And so between then and now, we would talk to a lot of ET collectives, the Lyrans, the Pleiadians, the Arcturians, all of the common ones and some uncommon ones. And after my second book, I was chomping at the bit to write something else. And I kept coming back to the ETs, and I was thinking, what do they want? What do they want to get out to humanity? Or what can I say about them? What do I need to know? And all of a sudden I saw this article about the 12 original starseed clusters that founded our galaxy. There are 12 original ones. Well, I knew about starseeds and all of that, but I didn't realize there were only 12 that had founded our galaxy. So as I talked to him, the way that we know that we're hitting something is his body starts to vibrate, and he'll get these
downloads,
these truth downloads. So as I'm talking about this article to him about a year ago, he's getting lit up, and we're like, oh, there's a there. Let's go up and channel. So we literally went right upstairs, channeled what we termed the 12 starseed. Is there a
Right.
council of these 12? We had no idea if there was. Well, there was a 12 council, and they came through and spoke to me, and they said, yes, you're hearing our transmission. You got it. Thank you. It's a broadcast. You clicked into it, and we are going to work with you. And so, long story short, I ended up writing a book on the 12, with each chapter being one of the 12 who had a specific transmission they wanted to communicate to humanity at this time.
Right.
It's called The Origin Story, and we just published it in June.
But what's fascinating about that connection, so when we see a client, I'm the one that holds the intent. I'm the one that knows the person's name. I'm the one that drops into trance for that particular session.
Like the radio transmission.
Like
You
the radio
connect to the
transmission,
signal.
right? Exactly. I'm
right?
connecting to that signal.
And I'm the left brain questioner,
the
basically.
analytical person that's going to ask the questions.
It's almost like and I know we can't get caught up in genders and stuff, but because I do see a lot of couples and you see the mix, right?
We're backwards.
Don't let the facade mess with you at all. Yes, I am completely the feminine side of the relationship.
That's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying. It's like, and
I've
met couples like this, and there's always a mix. I mean, it's, you know what I mean? But yeah, it's really, really interesting and really powerful. But yeah, I can see that. I can absolutely see that.
And so the fascinating thing was, as we went into channel for the book, I was actually channeling her. I was channeling her connection to these different groups. Instead of me just going, okay, I'm going to connect to the Lyrans and I'm going to start channeling the Lyrans. No, my focus was to connect to her energy. She was the amplifier. She was the one that was holding that energy. I would tap into that, and I was just the mouthpiece for the energy and the transmissions coming through her. So, which was completely fascinating. So, yeah.
Well, that speaks to some type of monadic connection or something, to be able to. That's fascinating.
Yeah,
it's like it's almost, God, what kind of analogy could you draw? But it's it's that cosmic geometry. It's that unexplainable. It's not the same math. It's not the same geometry.
No, it is not. It is not planetary math that as you know it. No.
Yeah. Now, how many? I think, is it 4 books? Was it 4 books?
I have 3, and then I was a co-author of 1.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I thought I remembered 4. Mm-hmm. So just to give us an idea, and if you guys are open to it, we would love to collaborate with you again down the road a little bit.
Sure.
Maybe 2-3 months, or something like that, so we can give other people the chance to come on. But yeah, I think that you definitely have a unique pedigree. It is unique. I've met a lot of power couples over the years, in person and on this show. You've got a really strong foundation. There's so many things we could jump into that you have code to offer, to include what's it like when you get mad at each other? What's it like when you get a trigger / activation? These practical things that so many people struggle with. And also even like, and we don't have to get into it now, but like even the misconceptions of, these false connotations of and expectations of twin flame energy, or whatever you want to call it. It's work. It's a lot of work. And and it takes a lot of devotion and a lot of perseverance, and I know that, but you guys would know it better than I do, because you've been doing this for 35 years.
Mm-hmm.
I got to ask you too, like, so many of the people that have come on this show, the crazy people that congregate here, that we know crazy is not crazy anymore, because the non-crazy people are coming to all of us asking for advice now.
Right.
But the typical story being, and you mentioned it earlier, with the young people, many of us, had imaginary friends, and we were told, that's not real, and so on and so on. Enter the matrix, go to sleep, get reawakened probably through some successive traumas. But one of the main attributes of these stories has been the estrangement from family and from workplace and from social atmospheres. But it sounds like the two of you have managed to keep that intact, which is also which is also quite fascinating because you're working in VA hospitals, you're retired military, you're in the school system. I mean, a lot of us try to fly under the radar, but you guys are just right out there up front and center. I mean, have you caught much flack, or do you have to really even think about it, or is your energy kind of setting the stage and entering the room before you do, so to speak?
Yeah, that's, I think, is the best analogy is our energy and our that force enters the door before we do. But it goes back to one of the very first channeling sessions when I was being induced through that practitioner. And some of what was brought through some downloads as well for our work with the veterans is that we're here to be the mainstream. We're here to work in the mainstream, right? And we're here to be, and I have to do this. So I wear Under Armour 90% of the time. It's just what I like to wear. And, it's synthetic, and people are like, oh, you can't wear synthetic. That's a low vibration material. You've got to wear this and this and this. No, I want to be the only metaphysical practitioner that is sponsored by Under Armour. It's that I jokingly say that, but you have to do what's comfortable. I don't change my lifestyle just because I have these gifts. I live the life we live our lives the way we've always lived our lives, but we enlighten our lives by what we do. We bring forth the authenticity of who we are into our normal day life because of what we do. So, it's,
I mean, are there people in our circle that think we're weird, or that in our previous circle? Absolutely. I had to come out to my staff because of an issue with a student that I had a different perspective on. And instead of them giving him meds for schizophrenia, I talked to the dad about, hey, this might be something else. And the dad said, yeah, I'm a prophet in my church. I understand what you're saying. I'm like, thank you. Thank you. Mm-hmm. And so because of that, I had to come out to my staff and I had to explain to them how I know what I know. And so I think they think I'm a little bit wonky, but I don't care. I really don't. Yeah. I mean, I have a doctoral degree and he's retired Coast Guard. And so
master's degree, I think
we're people, some people will look and say, well, she can't be crazy. I mean, she has a doctorate and he's Coast Guard. I mean, they're normal. So maybe there's something there. Maybe I need to investigate. I think that's part of our uniqueness, perhaps. But there are people I've heard, in the rumor mill that think I'm a little.
Yeah, but still, and I think, and I do think the universal energy, or the atmosphere's changed.
Yeah,
like a year or two pre-COVID. I'm sure there was a lot more. Burning crosses and people calling people witches and stuff like that. But I think as things have whether it's conscious or not, people are, like you talked about with the clients, the normal people coming in and they're having these experiences. So things are changing very rapidly. But again, I'm a big believer that it happens through through people like y'all. And I always wonder to myself, I'm like, God, I wonder how many there is. I wonder how many more there is like y'all.
Well, there are a lot, but if we don't speak about it, then people are hiding. They're afraid. But once I come out and say something, they're like, oh my gosh, like the friend that I was telling you, whose granddaughter speaks to the man in the moon. She had an ET experience at 4 years old, and she told hardly anyone at all until I started talking about how my husband is a medium and talks to dead people. And she is, oh my gosh, I have to tell you something. And she tells me this, and now we're really good friends. Yeah. So us speaking our truth gives permission to others to do the same, right?
Absolutely. I've said on this show for years that the highest it's my opinion, I guess you could say that it's my knowing really for myself, and that's all that really matters. But the highest level of transmissions, downloads, activations come from these conversations.
Yeah.
And because so much, I get messages, and now they're just like, flooding every day. And not all of them, but, some of them are, I guess you'd say business related or whatever. But so many messages, and so many times it kept me going. Like so many times I just wanted to quit. I'm tired of being broke. I'm tired of living on this is crazy. And, I really didn't have any stability till a couple of years ago, after years and years. But I would get these messages from people and they would say, this has changed my life. You know, watching a show, because they said, I thought I was the only one. And now they might be, I remember this one lady, she says, you know, I've had, you know, for 20 years, I've had unicorns and elves and fairies in my bedroom and my garden. And I tuned into your show one day, and she said, I've never had an ET experience. It's like the most foreign thing in the world to me. And she says, but I tuned into your show one day and I saw so-and-so on the show, and they're talking about these interactions that they're having with these ETs. And she said, and I knew I was home. And I thought, wow, how does this work? This lady's having elemental things, dragons and unicorns and such, and these persons over here talking about ETs. But it was because of I've always understood, and solargy is just another name for the energy that we share, right? Like Holy Spirit or whatever you want to call it, third energy, golden child energy. But I've always understood that it's as at least my direction and my personal guidance was, the effort is to create a small mirror of the universe, which is totally open. Everybody's reality is relevant. It's true. You know, I mean, just like as we were kids, we were told, no, you know, almost from like the get-go. No, don't do that. No, don't do that. And immediately we're having these fences put up on our borders. And so it's fascinating and an honor. It truly is. To be in the presence of a couple like you.
Thank you.
That is setting the tone, because these couples, we're all important, but these couples represent the basis of this new Earth grid. They really do, because look, we all came into this thing holy and whole. And then we came up with this great plan of who better to fool you than yourself, right? And yet I see these couples as the external version of the sacred marriage within us in this perfect imperfection. So to see it in the flesh is validating, it's inspiring, it's encouraging. And I just want to say thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for saying that.
Yeah,
that's the truth. I mean, for stepping out and doing this. So I'm excited to be able to collaborate with you in the future, whether you want to do it on an individual basis or do it as a couple. But I'd love to explore your experiences that are incorporated into the books and otherwise.
Yeah,
absolutely. This was a blast, Todd.
For sure.
And if you guys aren't doing anything December 8th, 9th, or 10th, come on down to Houston, Texas. The theme of this Solargy Fest, because we've had big names and you know, and that kind of thing, but it's everybody is a star. And so everybody, you know, like everybody on our network pays, me included, you know, we exchange $12.12 a month. Everyone that comes to the festival is a presenter or performer. And I think whether you come or you don't, I would just say, keep going and thank you and get the word out there, because I've experienced it for 4,300 shows. The more people talk about these things, the more people step up. And there's a lot of people stepping up now.
Yes.
My inbox is full. Yeah.
That's the beautiful thing about it. It's getting the conversations out there. I mean, you know, and you're right. You know, when you get the emails, and they usually come at those moments where you're just, like you said, you're just like, oh, you're tired. You're just ready to go. You know, it's like, really, do I need to keep going? And you get that one email and you're like, yep, I need to keep going.
So 4,300 shows. Thank you for holding the platform for all of us.
Holding that space.
And all of your audience. Thank you.
For sure.
Yeah, absolutely. I will send you an editable MP4 in about 20 minutes. And I look forward to collaborating with you again. Thank you again for coming in and sharing space with us and honoring us with your presence.
And
thank you, Todd. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Take care.
All righty.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.